starting at 3:30, and our block party at the Beloved Community Center. So we're back. I hope you enjoyed your meal for today. Let us get right into the meat. This is the Tides of Truth panel, and we're going to have my good friend Jill and Aria. Did I say that, Aria? Okay, good. I'll make sure. I remember saying Aria. Okay. And Jill are going to lead this wonderful discussion. That's why we brought them out. Hopefully, if you cannot see our panelists in the front, there are chairs up front to the right if you want to come closer to see. But we want to make sure that everyone gets settled in and we are quiet so we can hear what is about to be given to us. So I'm going to turn it over to our two moderators, Jill and Aria. I like our tech people moving chairs and getting that camera shot right. I like that. So, turn it over.
All right, thank you. Hey, everyone. How was lunch? All right. Well, I am Aria Florant, and I am excited to kick off this conversation. We're going to get into some deep stuff in the next couple hours. We're going to have a conversation as a panel, and we're going to engage y'all in discussion at your tables as well. So this is going to be as interactive as we can make it. So I am the co-founder and CEO of an organization called Liberation Ventures, and our North Star is to see federal comprehensive reparations for Black Americans. And when we started our work, we had a big question, which is, we knew that repair is deeply at the root of what reparations means to us. And we had this question, repair is such an abstract concept that it's hard to actually operationalize it if you don't really understand what it looks like in daily life. And so we did a ton of research to ask and answer this question of what is repair? And we learned from efforts around the globe that have been focused on reparative processes in other countries, like Germany and South Africa and Canada. We also learned from big at-scale efforts within the US. Many people don't know that the US has done reparations before, in particular for the Japanese American community. And we came to what we call our racial repair framework. And so I'm going to share that framework today just to help set the frame for this conversation, in particular because we know that reparations work actually really looks different in different places. And it has to look different because it's addressing different forms of harm. So the framework we developed is 4 components: reckoning, acknowledgement, accountability, and redress. So I'll say that again: reckoning, acknowledgement, accountability, and redress. And importantly, and something that I spend a lot of my time doing, is describing and explaining to people how what that framework means is that reparations is not just financial, it's also non-financial. We also think about those 4 components as happening in a continual cycle. Like, it's something that you can never stop, really, if you want to live in a society that actually has a culture of repair. And we believe that culture change is actually just as important as policy change, because culture change is what makes the policy change possible and durable. So I named those 4 components to say that one of the things that we have learned and seen over the last few years across the country is that different reparations efforts are often kind of targeting or focusing on different components within those 4. Some really go for redress first, some really go for reckoning first, which we would say is really the truth-telling piece. And so I think with our panelists here, we're going to hear about different approaches. And we wanted to give y'all just a sense for how we think about the fact that they are all sort of mutually reinforcing each other in the same way that we think about what comprehensive repair really means. With that, I'm going to pass it to Jill.
Before I ask our panelists to introduce their initiatives. I was really struck by the conversation earlier about children in the room, and I really love that we have children in the room. They may not understand frameworks and so forth. So one time, I was the executive director of the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was 5 years old when we did that back in 2004 through 2006. And during the course of that time, I promise you, it was Reverend Dr. Peter Story who came and told a story that I want to share. He doesn't remember having told it, but I still think it was him. And the story was about two farmers. One farmer steals another farmer's cow. A few days later, they meet up. They're walking down the road. They meet up with each other. And the farmer whose cow got stolen says, "Hey, why did you steal my cow?" The second farmer says, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stolen your cow." And then the second farmer starts to walk away, and the first farmer says, "Hang on, what about my cow?" And the second farmer says, "We done apologized. Why you got to keep bringing up that cow?" So as you're thinking about this, if you need a more simple framework, I offer that one. Don't forget about the cow. So with that, I want to invite, we have some wonderful panelists. We just got into a wonderful conversation. Part of the reason we're late starting this session is because we couldn't wrap it up because everybody was so excited, and I'm excited for you to be a part of it now. I'm going to ask first Dr. Dwight Mullen from the Asheville Reparations Commission. Don't let him act like, of course, I told him at the table he was going to go first. So we're going to ask Dr. Mullen to share. What I've asked them each to do is very briefly, it's probably an impossible task, share their project, the origin, the scope of their research, and then I've asked them each to share one part of their process that they think is really could be useful to those of you in the room and to other people up here engaging in your own truth-seeking and reparations work. And then one question or struggle they have that they want to get feedback on, not just from the other panelists here, but from you all in the room. So you're going to get put on the spot to offer them some feedback later, so please listen carefully. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Mullins.
I'm very grateful for this invitation from the mountains. We often feel left out. We often feel left out being in the western part of the state. So I appreciate being brought into the mainstream. In terms of what's happening in Asheville, everyone is surprised that reparations could even be discussed in Asheville. What are you all doing up there? Well, it began in 2006, 2007. An undergraduate research project called the State of Black Asheville involved the documentation of whether or not racial discriminations were still occurring in public policy areas. So students looked at education, healthcare, housing, economic development, and justice. They looked at 5 different areas, and they did it for the next 10 years. Each year, of course, the disparities were there by race and by gender, but for each year, in every one of the areas, the disparities grew. And so in the year of the pandemic, the year of turmoil, the killing of George Floyd, demonstrators and community activists gathered together to demand change. And it started with the idea of an apology and the recognition of past harms, which was eventually followed by the formation of the Reparations Commission of Asheville and Buncombe County. So it represents the city and the county. The first struggle was who would be on this commission. And rather than making it a blue ribbon commission, it was made into a community legacy commission. It's made up of a majority of regular, normal people. And these people brought different understandings and different interests. And so when I look at really what's going on in terms of our struggles today, we made 2 significant, should I address this now? 2 significant points I'd like to bring up what we accomplished so far. One is that we have in perpetuity $500,000 coming from the city and $500,000 coming from the county to go into a reparations fund. And this is done without knowledge of what we would actually form as our types of implementable policies in each of the 5 areas. Our city council and county commission are not really been our challenge as much as it's been. Something I'd like to point out to you, a struggle that we have had, has actually been with program management. It's actually been with the administration. It's been behind the scenes with bureaucracy and administration. Those are difficult. Those are where the real fights have occurred. And we continue to struggle today, and I appreciate any input you might have on that. Let me give another major, I think, one other thing I'd like to say to you is that as we look at reparations in Asheville, the definition of reparations hasn't come up because it's come up and it's been ignored pretty much because we didn't start with enslavement. We started where the rubber meets the road. We started with present day harms. And so the second major accomplishment of the Reparations Commission has been the demand for an audit of whether or not the harms have actually ended. And if not, if court orders are not being obeyed, if administrative directions are not being obeyed, if other types of measures that say the harms have ended are actually not true, we are being able to pinpoint it without going through the reparations process, knowing that the boat still has holes in it. And so we're waiting for that report to be issued in this coming February. In fact, Friday, I'm supposed to meet with one of the directors. This is an ongoing, very, very strenuous process. And at a personal level, we're talking a year and a half of being chair, and this energy level is unsustainable. It's impossible to continue to do this at the level at which it requires. And so transitions in leadership are important, and I'd like for you to consider wherever you are. Don't associate with a personality. Associate it with the movement and the purpose.
Thank you very much. We're glad your energy level has sustained you to be with us today. We hope it will continue. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Joe Alston to speak about the High Points. It's actually the One High Point Commission. Is that right? Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. All right, so again, my name is Joseph Alston, and I was the chair because the commission has been dissolved at this point. But the One High Point Commission on Reparations was the brainchild of the High Point NAACP. They formed a reparations committee and approached the city of High Point with a resolution to study reparations for the city. The city, in turn, with a 5-4 vote, agreed to take on the project and created a city commission, which it has its advantages and its disadvantages. So we got started about a year and a half ago, and one of the greatest challenges that we had was among ourselves. Okay, the commission was made up of 2 NAACP members, 2 city council people, and the other 9 are community activists. When you start talking about reparations, it's a very emotional topic. And there are, as you heard before, several different approaches. We had commissioners that wanted to come out the gate fighting. And the conversation was, here we are representing the oppressor, trying to get, reparations. Well, that's where we were. But it took us about 6 months for the commission to actually gel. Early on, we decided that, let me back up. So the city developed a resolution, and we were to study reparations from 1859 through present day. That's a huge, huge span of time. The city of High Point was incorporated in 1859, and we started out looking at lineage-based reparations. But we all know the challenges there is basically the record keeping. So how do you determine who was a part of the city of High Point at that time? So quickly we changed focus and started looking at restorative, and I'm gonna add economic, restorative policies. In moving in that direction, and I go back to the jelly, we first had to educate the commissioners on what the city could do and what it couldn't do. And how government works, you know. And those of us sitting in this room, that sounds like a topic that you should not have to cover. But when people don't work within that framework on a daily basis, or they don't understand. So after some really, really tough infighting, I mean, to the point where I had T-shirts and caps with my face on it, Joe must go, and you know, we had commissioners being arrested at city council meetings. And, I mean, it was real ugly there for a minute. But once we jailed, we did not have the problems of city administration because it was a city commission. We had the community and the communications and the communications department working hand in hand with us throughout the whole process. So we were able to educate the citizens of High Point as we went through this process. The city council, I mean, the city manager was a strong advocate for the project. We had no money. There was nothing allocated to do the research and all the other parts of getting to the recommendation. So we wound up utilizing content experts who were a part of, who had close ties to the city. And we actually went from the origination of slavery till today. And that it was tough. It was tough and in-depth. When looking at the periods during the Jim Crow era, you know, it really hit home to a lot of people. And those of us that are in the room that are my age or older, and I'm 67, you know, we lived through a lot of that. And that was one of the things that we had to have long discussions on. Because this wasn't something that, now I'm back to the emotional part of it, and I'm sorry. But, you know, this wasn't something we read in books. You know, this wasn't something that Dr. So-and-so told us. You know, we lived through this. I experienced at an early age cross burnings and having to go in the back alleys of stores to get in. Having the older black ladies in the community standing up holding blankets while we're trying to try on school clothes, you know. And once we tried the clothes on, they never made it to the front. So, you know, we had to tell those stories. We even have a documentary that we will share with you all before you leave that I'd love for you to take a look at. But going back to the process, it took us about 18 months. We concentrated on, we had a committee that researched federal reparations. We had a committee that did the genealogy piece. And then we started looking at those areas that the city could actually make changes. Now, we all know that as hard as we fight change takes place inside. And we were fortunate enough to have change agents that were on city council. Problem now, we have elections in 2 weeks. This whole process and all that we did may change in 2 weeks. So, we stress to the city and those residents in the city that they have to go to the polls. They have to go to the polls. The way we made our recommendations tolerable, and if I'm taking too much time, y'all please stop me.
We'll have plenty of time to discuss more, but go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay, so I'll just kind of stop there, but we actually looked at education, we looked at economic development, we looked at housing, criminal justice, and those other areas that the city could actually focus on and make changes in. The recommendation was passed by 8-1 vote of city council. So I kind of think we're the first ones in North Carolina that got a reparations package passed. So that's where we are right now.
Something to be proud of. So for those of you who are keeping track and thinking about the questions that are going to be posed to you later, I heard, and tell me if this is right, that in Asheville, one of their challenges was with the administration who wanted to, I may be putting words in your mouth, but we're trying to, maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally, undermine the spirit of your project and what you're trying to do by pigeonholing everything into their existing processes. And then another challenge is just the sustainability of how you keep this going after people get burned out. And then with High Point, I heard one of the big challenges, there's a lot, but one is how to keep this going after elections. And after the commission dissolves, right? Okay. So let me pass it on to Dr. Kim Cook and Mr. Franklin Roberts from Wilmington, and I think they're from Coming to the Table chapter there. And we're excited to hear about yours.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this illustrious panel, especially the visionaries who put this together. And I'd like to thank Ms. Raspberry for picking up the ball when I dropped it. So my name's Frankie Roberts. We are from Wilmington, North Carolina. Certainly Wilmington had the only massacre or coup d'etat recorded, successful coup d'etat that happened in American history, which was an overthrow of the government. Kim has pulled me into coming to the table, and we co-chair that. And one of our primary projects has become the 1898 massacre. And I would just mention one of the high points, and then Kim can take it on in. One of the high points of working with the 1898 descendants is the descendants. Not only the victims, but we also have the victimizers at the table, or their families. And that's one of the big points, because I think in the reparations conversation, it should be the victimizers who leads that conversation as it relates to navigating the politics of it. And then certainly the descendants should be the ones that kind of outline what reparations should look like, because it was their families who was, kind of demoralized in that process. I'm gonna kick it to Kim.
How do you follow that? First of all, it really is an honor to be here, and I want to thank our organizers for putting together such a wonderful set of events over these next couple of days. And to invite us to be a part of it is truly an honor, and thank our facilitators for this panel to be so well organized. I'm Kim Cook. I'm a professor of sociology and criminology at UNC-W, and I'm also the director of the Restorative Justice Collaborative at UNC-W. And I'm also a descendant of perpetrators of genocide and enslavement. So there's that. Coming to the Table is a restorative justice initiative. It's a national organization working to, the tagline is, Take America Beyond the Legacy of Enslavement. And we have a chapter in Wilmington that Frankie and I started in 2017. For the last year and a half, maybe 2 years or so, we've been organizing our conversations around advocating for reparations, not only for the descendants of the victims of the 1898 massacre and coup d'etat, although that is huge, also for the descendants of people who were enslaved in Wilmington. And we have many people in our group, and it's growing every month. It seems we get more people coming in. Some of you who are here have been in our meetings. And the conversation that we're having at Coming to the Table with respect to reparations includes examining the 2006 Commission, 1898 Commission report, and the recommendations that the Commission report offered in 2006. There's 15 recommendations clustered around 4 different themes, which are the similar themes to what were just mentioned a few minutes ago in the resolution in High Point. And part of what we've done is we've looked at what reparations has been doing in other places, or how the conversation is unfolding in other places so that we can learn. We also started a petition to launch and to support reparations. So if any of you want to go on to change.org and look for reparations in Wilmington, North Carolina, and sign the petition, feel free to do that. And we are also looking at the recommendations in terms of, are they still necessary? Because the recommendations from the 2006 Commission were to the state of North Carolina and what the state of North Carolina should do to repair the harm of the 1898 massacre and coup d'etat. And the state hasn't really addressed in any material, significant ways what the recommendations were actually addressing or trying to remedy. And so we did a survey an enumeration of all of the recommendations, and then an enumeration of the ways in which the state has actually addressed those recommendations, and then an enumeration of what's happening in the community to continue to address the needs that are reflected in those recommendations. It's a really interesting set of information if any of you are Wilmington locals or you want to know more about what's happening there on the ground. It's kind of an audit of what the inequalities are. And we're having, we just had Reparations Week. If Cedric's in the room, can you please stand up? Cedric Harrison? Cedric Harrison is Executive Director of Support the Port and also a business owner in Wilmington, has a Black History tour bus called Wilmington in Color. And he organized a series of events for Reparations Week last week. So we had Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday events all last week to focus on reparations, which was awesome. So we're launching a community-wide big conversation about it. And Cedric is really one of the people that's very much invested in this conversation. Next month, November, we're having the commemoration events, the 125th anniversary of the 1898 massacre and coup, and we have a series of events. Part of our work as Coming to the Table is we participate in organizing events around commemorating the violence and the overthrow of the government in 1898. And this year we have 1898 Real Talk, which is going to be on November 8th at UNC-W. Descendants in Dialogue, so it'll be the direct descendants of the victims and targets of the massacre and coup, as well as the perpetrators of the massacre and coup. So if you want to hear what descendants from both sides of that story are saying now, come to Wilmington. We also have a multi-faith blessing happening at the site of the Daily Record, which was the newspaper, the only daily newspaper owned by African-American man in Wilmington in 1898 named Alex Manley. It was burned to the ground. He was run out of town. And the lot where the Daily Record once stood is now a vacant lot. And we're going to do a multi-faith blessing on that location, on November 10th. of 2023, so 125 years to the minute. We're starting in the morning at 9:45, and we will have an Indigenous land acknowledgement and blessing, and then we will have also the descendants sharing their thoughts and blessings, as well as local faith leaders. And we will spread wildflower seeds to create more beauty in that space that's been marred by such violence. So we're working on it. We have a draft resolution. We haven't taken it out of draft form yet, but we're working on, our next step is to work on getting some support from local elected officials, which might be tricky in Wilmington. Thank you for listening.
All right. So just to clarify, the challenge you want to pose to the group is around getting the support of local elected officials?
That's the next one, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now I want to pass it on to Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler from Charlotte. He is working on a project called Reimagining America. Excited to hear about it.
Thank you so much. So several years ago, during the Obama administration, I worked with a group called the Truth, Reconciliation, Atonement Commission, which was a group of leaders from Charlotte, North Carolina, that worked with a woman named Lee Blake, Alicia Keys' manager for social action. We took an idea to the Obama White House that we wanted to do a national truth and reconciliation process. We got their buy-in, but we were unfortunately too late in their administration. So they said, go to the next administration. So we met with Hillary Clinton, thinking that she was going to take over. We had a good conversation with her, met with Bill Clinton, had a good conversation with him. But then we know what happened in 2016. So we brought the idea back to Charlotte. We started something called the Commission on Racial Equity, which was a wonderful project that was started by the, and I wish Reverend Lindsay were here right now, it was started by the Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice. We tried to hand it off to a couple groups, and unfortunately, it did not develop the way we wanted it to. It did spark something called Restorative Justice Charlotte, which was an attempt to provide reparations for the Brooklyn community that was leveled in 1970. So we've been continuing to work on these smaller issues, these smaller committees for a while. After George Floyd was killed, we had an uprising that developed in Charlotte. First night of that uprising, I found myself out on the street, and I ran into the former mayor of Charlotte, Jennifer Roberts, and we began a conversation. And the conversation went something like, things are different this time. We noticed that people in the streets were walking around with AK-47s, with AR-15s, with 9mm strapped to their sides. We said, we've got to do something, because if we don't change this, it's going to be a civil war. As Reverend Nelson says, we're already in a cold civil war. So we began to think about what we could do differently. And we also said, since she was the former mayor, we know what happens every time this goes on. The city council says we're going to do something, and nothing changes. The police department says we're going to do something, and nothing changes. And in essence, we bring in a police commission, and they look at everything and say, oh, things will be better now, and they're exactly the same. So we decided we've got to do something different. So we came up with this thing called the Reimagining America project. And the fundamental premise of this was that we need to change some fundamental things in our system. And let's talk about a few of the things that are different about what we do. The first thing that's different is we decided that we could not deal with issues of racism, instances of racism and racial disparity. We had to deal with something more fundamental, and that's the issue of race itself. So I planted a rose bush in my front yard years ago near my mailbox, and I thought it would make beautiful pink flowers and people come around and be happy. But the kids in the neighborhood would ride their bikes around, and they'd run into the rose bush. Dr. Sadler, please get rid of that rose bush. The mail people would try to put mail in the mailbox and get tricked. Mr. Sadler, we're not delivering mail unless you get rid of the rose bush. So I cut the rose bush down. 3 months later, guess what happened? Rose bush came back. Cut it down at the end of the season, thinking over the winter it would be gone, came back the next year. So I was out there looking at this rose bush one day, and one of my neighbors who has a landscaping business came up and said, Rodney, if you want the rose bush to go away, you have to get rid of the root. So we said that as we deal with the issue of racism in America, we constantly deal with the presenting issue, the bush. We constantly deal with black kids are failing in schools. We'll try to tweak this. Infant maternal mortality is significant for black women. We'll tweak this. People are being shot by police officers. We'll put cameras on them. Now we have better pictures of people getting shot by police officers. we need to change something fundamental, and we said we have to deal with the root. The root is the issue of race itself. Kwame Anthony Appiah says that the notion of racism is impossible without the concept of race. What's his name? Ta-Nehisi Coates says that the concept of race itself is a racist idea. In order to begin to transform what's going on with racism, we have to deal with the idea that somehow or another we're fundamentally, ontologically, biologically, genetically different from each other, and that difference suggests difference in wealth, power, and privilege. So that's really what we're trying to focus on. How do we begin to change that ideological dynamic that undergirds the basic inequalities that we see in our nation? We've tried to do this through a number of ways, and one way is beginning to deal with hearts and minds. We've had more than 10 hearings so far that have looked at everything from healthcare, housing, education, voting access, employment, all of these different issues. And we're really trying to help people to both have head change, this is going on, you need to see it, but also heart change. Some of your colleagues, some of the people you live with in community are suffering regularly because of race. Utilize this to begin to break up the ground. And then once we have our hearings, we have these committees that are working on these different siloed areas to say, how do we begin to think about reimagining what the system would look like if we got it right, if we got something that was just, that was fair, and that was equitable for all God's children made in God's image. So those are two of the things that we've put together that we think are somewhat different. So we're trying to develop a national model, but by working closely in the Charlotte area to think about what that would look like. What would that system of change look like? This is not short-term work. We know that this is long-term work in order to begin to change not just policies, but hearts and minds to lead to changes in policies that will begin to make the systemic shifts that are necessary in our larger society. We also, one other thing I want to talk about is we think in a fusion way. The idea is that you can't really fix what's going on in the education system if you don't know what's going on in the healthcare system. And you can't fix what's going on in healthcare if you don't know what's going on with employment. And employment really depends upon what you're able to vote for, if you have access to the polls. So all of these things have to work together in a concerted way if we're going to move towards the kind of progress that we'd like to see. So that's a little bit about the Reimagining America project. If I were to think about the biggest difficulty we've had so far, it's fundraising. We have a wonderful staff, executive director, program assistant, a production assistant, and a number of committee chairs. Our committee chairs really do run the day-to-day work of the organization. We need to get them to be able to be funded. We have also another, in addition to our 5 major chairs and positions, something that we call Bridging the Gap. And the Bridging the Gap committee really exists because we realized that as we looked around the community, we're talking to ourselves. We keep talking to the same kinds of progressive-minded people, people that understand there is a problem. How do we begin to talk to the other side? So Bridging the Gap is meant to develop models of engagement across the ideological, political, and theological divides that separate us as a people in our nation. So that's a little bit about the Reimagining America project. And I would love for you all to help. You can all come and join us. We meet every Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:30, Reverend Lindsay, 5:30 to 6:30 for our weekly meetings, once a month at 1 to 2 for our leadership team meetings, and then our committee meetings meet every week, every other week, depending upon what's going on. We almost always have something going on. Healthcare is about to look at maternal mortality, and what's going on in the African American community. Education is going to look at the way that our school system continues to fail our African American children, and what's going on with changes going on now. And right now, criminal justice is trying to put together a conversation with faith leaders and our police chief to talk about the way that the police system continues to fail the African American community. So things are constantly going on. We'd love to have you involved. Anybody here can join any of our meetings because we do them all on Zoom at any given point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sadler. So your main challenge is fundraising. Nobody else has that problem in the room, right? This is a unique challenge to Charlotte not having enough funds. But no, thank you for putting that out there. And then the other one is around engaging people who have different perspectives or different political persuasions.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now I'm going to ask the Johnsons, Reverend Nelson and Joyce Johnson, to say a few words about this process that I guess we're all a part of, because this isn't telling you about a process that's happening somewhere else. This is a process that we're all a part of by virtue of being here. And I'll hand it over to you all.
First, let me express appreciation to each of you for the work that you're doing and the work that you will continue to be doing. Our truth and reconciliation process grew from a particular moment and a particular event that occurred in 1979, where the police collaborated with Klan and Nazis, gave them the permit where we were to march, and actually facilitated them coming into town. And we were union organizers. We were organizing intensely at Cone Mills and a little bit at Burlington Mills. These are all textile industries. One of the former mayors of Greensboro was the lead attorney for Cone Mills. As a result of the collaboration of the city, including the police, the Klan and the Nazis, they came into town and killed people. The police knew they were in town, saw them loading the weapons in their cars, or in one car, and then followed them to the site of the murder and didn't do anything until 5 people were dead, 10 others wounded, and an African-American community terrorized. As a result of that, we were largely blamed for that happening because we said the Klan were racist and other derogatory things about the Klan. As a consequence, many of the people who were working with us were jailed, including myself, after having been injured. And there was a long court process. All the Klan and Nazis were acquitted, and that resulted in the city almost being forced to drop charges against those of us who had been indicted in jail. This is some backstory. And we eventually won a civil suit for one person. He was the only person who was not a part of the organization that sponsored this. And I share this as background, but and the city did eventually, because of the organizing, bringing together the grassroots community, bringing together especially the clergy, Reverend Haddon, Reverend Allen, Reverend Brown, and we met with the city because you couldn't meet with them as a whole, so we met with them 2 by 2 and put the evidence on the table and actually put the push on the table that these people had the capacity to form a significant movement to push this. It was in that context that the city offered an apology and offered a scholarship for 5 students in the name of the 5 people killed. And that was some, how can I say, some acknowledgement
of the ugly and meanness and the lies told in order to cover it up. As we continued our work, and by the way, that happened because of grassroots organizing. It wasn't that they were just persuaded by meeting with us. And I want to make the argument that all over the state of North Carolina, we've learned of similar things, of people being killed, of neighborhoods being torn apart, of coup d'etats being carried on. And it's fairly clear to me that very little of this will result in transformative change without a movement. It takes power. And actually, power comes from committed people joining together around focus and purpose. And so it is on that basis that we made a decision to initiate the North Carolina Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation process. And it starts with truth. Without truth, forget justice.
Amen.
And what are the truths of the abuse and the discrimination and the bad treatment of people of color in particular, but people who are poor, you know? And so our vision was to build on the Truth and Reconciliation process, which was a measure of success, but I would argue a very limited measure of success. The city did finally stagger to the table of justice and acknowledge that our police officers are complicit in these murders. And by implication, so was the city council. We received that, but we didn't want to leave it there. And as I have listened to people in this group, it's a testimony to how different areas are experiencing these abuses and are attempting to fight back. My argument is very simple. Let's build the unity of a diverse group of people across the state of North Carolina that collectively have the power to challenge this direction and fundamentally change it. I think what people are doing in their cities is absolutely necessary. It's absolutely good, and it needs to be done. But it's just as necessary to link up with other places, because the city is a limited power to start with. The state actually is the bigger power. They have the power to draw crooked lines and pack and stack people in one district so that the fight for the vote actually ends up being less than it ought to be. It has the power to pass labor laws that actually negatively affect everybody. It has the power to shift funds from public schools in disguised ways that you don't quite see. And so we think that the transformative possibility lies with both cities and states. How do we bring these together? And that's what we're trying to do. That's what this conference is about. And I want to express deep appreciation for each of the presenters here. And let me add that we've been thinking about and wrestling with a view. I was reading something about the Great Salt March in India, where the British were going to tax salt And Gandhi organized a long march from his prayer place. And it wound through the city, through the towns and villages in India to the sea, Arabic Sea, I think, one of those seas. And actually, it actually raised the consciousness of the people of India, that all could see that there was no need to pay these high taxes when there was plenty of salt for people to be collected. And I want to suggest today that the fullness of justice will come when we are able to build a qualitative unity across the historical ditches of division and confusion that has the power to push through policies, laws, and habits that shift the landscape. We talk of it as a river. The streams are there, you know. I share that the water runs on the side of the road, and then it runs into a little stream, and the little stream runs down into a bigger stream, and that stream runs into a creek, and that creek runs into a river. And we've been teaching that a river does not have to beg about how to get to the ocean. It has the power to carve a highway through the landscape. And I think that's what we need. And I think not only do we need it in North Carolina, if we can do it in North Carolina, it would be something for the nation. Amen. It would not just be for North Carolina. And so that's part of our thinking. We've been visiting Asheville and having wonderful discussion. We've been down to Wilmington, had wonderful discussion. Been out to Halifax, Warren, and Northampton counties. And of course, we've been to Durham and Raleigh. And they're just budding pieces. And I'm so glad to see the workers from USS-W. Almost forgot the W. Say something back there. That's what I'm talking about. We got to build the energy, and we got to believe in the possibility of people changing. And I think that while this might look like a black initiated thing, that the point is to reach across the deliberate ditches of division and build qualitative unity with the beautiful diversity of the human family. And that's when I think the pitting us against each other can be pushed to the side as we push toward qualitative change. We've not yet listed the particularities of the change on the state basis because we want that to be a collective initiative with High Point in it, and with Wilmington in it, and with Asheville in it, and with Northampton County in it, and of course the largest city in the state, Charlotte, in it, doing a lot of reimagination. And that's where we're going, that's where we're trying to go. And I will end with this. We have put forth the idea of a long march. And the long march, actually, ideally, we were thinking about starting in Asheville and marching to the Atlantic Ocean. We met with some friends in Wilmington, and they would say they would be glad to participate in that. And at that time, we think we should issue, Brandon has been struggling with me on this, a manifesto, or he said, ordinary people don't understand that, a call for qualitative change, item by item, issue by issue, based on the collective power of the people. That's what we are working toward. And I am so pleased and so happy to see so many of you here. And before you leave, we're going to have a sign up for the Long March, which we're looking at in April and in March and April. And we want to pull together the church, the churches. That's a powerful source of energy. Pull together students, another powerful source. Pull together local organizations in cities. That's when we become a sufficient force to shift the narrative and change the landscape.
So thanks, Nelson, and thanks for starting back with the Greensboro Truth Process. I would have probably started with where we are now. So thanks for that perspective. But I think one of the questions you raised, Jill, maybe you or Aria, was what particular problems are we grappling with? What do we need help on? And a few people have said, yeah, everything is the answer. Few people have said money for sure. But it's more the people resources. When we have moved around the state, we feel your hearts, we feel your interest, and wow, yeah, we need this. But we need us, whether you're from a large city like Charlotte, or if you're from a smaller hamlet in a rural area. In fact, there is a hamlet in North Carolina. Y'all probably know that. We need you to act on whatever level you're called to. Whether it's in your family, if you're a grandmother like myself, speaking to other family members and grandchildren. If you're a professor, speaking with them. If you're a person at an agency and you see the people coming in and out, trying to find housing and jobs that you don't have for them. You just have a list of things you can't do. And that comes by beloved community. We could hardly get our work done yesterday trying to get ready for this because they're homeless people who are up and down the street every day, and they know Beloved's a place where you're welcome and loved. But we don't have the resources either. But whatever you can do, but first I think believe that the people in your neighborhood, in your city, in your county, in your state can make a difference if someone steps up and pulls them out. So we need the local leadership, the organizational leadership. I've seen many organizational leaders here. You know, we're not asking you to stop anything you're doing because all of it and more are needed. But we've got to have a way to build that power so that what's happening in Asheville is helping what's happening in High Point. That's what we need now. So it's thinking outside of the issue box. It's certainly thinking outside of what candidate box. So that would be the big thing I would say is, folks, you don't have to call it truth, justice, and reconciliation. We think that's a big blanket, an umbrella, you know. But we do need to know how to be connected in a strong, strong way so that we can do our work. That was some of what we learned in the 60s. A whole lot we didn't learn. But we did learn that part and cherish it even more now. The individualism that we fight against in this country is soaked deep inside of us. It's there. And if we don't work with ourselves and people around us, whether it's about whether you're at the right church or the right fraternity or the whatever like that, we'll never be able to get to that point. So whatever it takes to do that, we have got to overcome some of those things. We won't be perfect with it. But I tell you, when it gets going, it is like that river that can move us further down the road.
Joyce, could I say one more thing? I meant to mention that there are a lot of movements in North Carolina, or a lot of justice initiatives. And we don't need to be competing with each other. We need to figure out how they work together. We had the good fortune to mention to Reverend Barbara what we are doing, and we look forward to having a deeper discussion about how the work that we did together with Reverend Barbara can be a part of what we're talking about, and we being a part of what they are doing. And I think that's a way of looking at things. And by the way, This question of money is both needed and a big headache because people use it to play people against each other. And we have to have the resources, but we have to learn not to get caught up in that game of being pitted against each other to get a few dollars. Because it is the domination of money, who's the guy, Elon Musk and all the rest of them, that funds both of the parties. And so we've got to be careful with all of that. I can't say don't take money because we need it, but we don't need to break relationships over a few dollars. Say it again.
All of us are not broke. Some of us do have money that we can put to the movement. I'm sorry.
We are going to open it up to the audience. I thank you all so much for just going into depth on the work that you've been at for the last few years. Thank you for being honest about the challenges that you're facing. I want to try to tie some of the things you all said together with a couple of questions, and then we will get out to the audience for audience questions. One of the things that I was kind of keeping track of is, across all of y'all's experiences, what are the things that every city needs in order to be successful? One of those things is political will from elected officials. And I heard also not just elected, but also the admin, like the administration that's in there and has been in there for a long time. And some of you had a fair amount of that political will, and then some of you didn't. And I think the question is, it's a two-part question. One part is, for those of you who had it, what advice do you have for folks who really need to build it right now? But then the second part of the question is, when does it become most necessary to have that political will? And is there even a benefit to not having it in the beginning and then building it later on or over time? And that, I'm opening it up to anyone who wants to jump in.
Okay, I'll jump in. One of the things that was most important in what we were doing is understanding the political process, knowing what can and I won't use the word can't anymore, what can and won't be done. By understanding the process, you'll know what to ask for. Okay, I'm sorry. By understanding the process, you'll know what to ask for and how to go about getting what you need. There is always a way. We went a year and a half we went a year with no funding. And we were able to cross the finish line with $40,000. Drop in the bucket. But I think the biggest advantage that we had is that there were some of us that understood the process. I use the analogy that this is a game, a serious game, but a game nonetheless. And unless you know how to play the game will play you. So, that's the big plus is knowing that. The downside is knowing the political process and who's in office and who has control. And as I said before, change has to happen within. How do we get that change to happen within? Is putting the right people in place. And back to the dollar, every dollar isn't a good dollar. You know, what dollars do is tie you to somebody. And in doing this work, you have to have autonomy in order to do it. So I think, did I answer the question?
I'd like to also, in Asheville, political will is directly tied to the level of community activism and pressure placed on city council and county commission. It's a direct result of that. I find that where we're lacking is that same pressure being placed on the private sector. Because you see, when reparations, we're needing reparations, not because of what the federal government did at the local level, it's because of what local people did to other local people. But in our process and conversations, they have not been engaged to match the funds that the public sector has put in. They've not been engaged in terms of taking part in our conversations with the legacy communities. And we're constructing a way to engage them. Yeah, and that's probably, other than the absence of trust, that I see as being a major challenge. And when I say absence of trust, is that trust is not on the table. It's just not a point of conversation. It's the implementation of our recommendations, and either it's done or it's not done. And we are wanting a permanent body to oversee, once we establish what recommendations are going to be adopted, we are looking for a permanent body to supervise the implementation of those recommendations to make sure that it happens in the long run.
You want to jump in too?
Just want to jump in simply. We started off with the idea of top-down and leadership-directed change, and then shifted to grassroots and decided to work in a different direction than working with our city officials. And in part, this was a necessary thing that just developed because of the way that we did the work in Charlotte in the end. But in part, there is another issue. So in the city of Charlotte right now, the current mayor, has a race initiative. And it is a very, very well-funded, very expensive thing. But it's sort of sucking up all the oxygen in the area. So they've got a few investments to improve the corridors of technology, to work on places that have been underserved with economic development, and to enhance Johnson C. Smith University. Worthy goals, but the problem is they are very limited goals. They won't change the larger issues that we're working with. So the way that we envision it, the initial work has to be done with community, and then we work towards, in that third phase, toward the community, reimagine what the community should look like, and then work towards lobbying and working with government officials for systemic change. So, a different way of looking.
Thank you. I wanted to see if either of other two panelists wanted to, or groups wanted to chime in on this. I think it's in particular a place at the coming to the table sort of makes me think of a metaphor I hear in this work a lot, which is how do you get more people at the table? But often in that metaphor, we don't think about who is setting that table, whose dining room is that table in? And I know that, I don't know much about Wilmington, but I know that one thing that I've really learned so much from working with Reverend Nelson and Joyce Johnson is the value of setting your own table. If somebody doesn't want you at their table, set your own table, right? And so, and then maybe they'll be clamoring to come to your table, or the people at your table get organized and go to their table. So I don't know if either of our other two panelists organizations want to weigh in, but wanted to put that out there.
Frankie's going to say a few words, and then I'll say a few words.
Well, we are just at the point of starting to meet with elected officials because obviously the conversation around reparations is a landmine. So what me and Kim has decided to do is meet with the elected officials individually because typically if you want the truth for how they feel, you're going to have to meet with them. But I do believe, based on what you expressed earlier, now is the time for us to bring them in on the conversation once we have some idea of what we want to ask for. And ensuring that, again, in our community, that the victims kind of lead that conversation. Because sometimes you can get out in front and say, this is what I'd like to have. Sometimes it's not practical. And one of the things we do at the table is kind of hash out practicality beyond anything else. But I guess, as John Maxwell said, we got to practice the art of navigation. Even which elected official to meet with first, and so forth and so
on. One of the things that I think would be helpful for us in Wilmington, since we're just at the beginning point of trying to build political will or trying to gauge what the political will might be as we start going more public with our effort, is state officials, mayors, county commissioners, city councilors, they know each other across the state. So it would be super helpful to us in Wilmington, I think. Frankie, correct me if you disagree, because whenever he's, anyway, whatever. If this is a step in the wrong direction, I want you to tell me, seriously. So it would be helpful to me if we had a list of city and county officials, elected officials in these different communities that have been vocal supporters of your efforts toward reparations, so that we can give them those names and say, look, this is what's happening in High Point. This is what's happening in Charlotte. These are some people that are on board in this effort in these different communities, and maybe you can have a conversation with them about what that looks like in their community and maybe bring some of those ideas back here. Maybe that would work, right? So this is a formal request for connections across the different city and county governments to coordinate among elected officials what got them to the point of supporting this. Thank you for listening. Did I get it okay?
And you might have to take a more active role than just saying, hey, you might want to call this person. You might invite them there.
Yeah. I'm good with that. And I can always host a dinner at my house. It's really no problem. I do it all the time. It's a small house.
Have to sit close and gain trust, right? But to respond to what Aria was asking, and Jill, you're correct. We here in Greensboro have had to build spaces, build places, build possibility. That's been, on the one hand, a burden, but it also has provided a basis for us to tap the best from the people. Because something I think that we suffer from, particularly in this country, is this sense of looking up that there's some savior. From my perspective, we already have a savior, but looking for someone to be the answer to problems that we can and must solve.
Yes.
And I'm especially amazed when I see that coming from younger people. As a baby boomer, as a child of the 60s, we had the sense, arrogant of course with it, but that if something wasn't right, you make it right.
Amen.
And it looks like that has dissipated too much. I suspect it comes from progress, on the one hand, when people have some more avenues that we did not have. But, your grandmother told you, make a way out of no way, So when you believe that, you do it. So we need more of that. Some of you already know that the Greensboro process and what we're engaged in now statewide was not endorsed by any governmental structure. In fact, it was opposed initially. Objectively, pieces have been embraced. In fact, we were always open to that. But it just did not come. We can see pieces now. And we see progress in Greensboro from work that we've done. But as Nelson said, it was always undergirded by organizing with the parties of the first part, the people who were being oppressed because of housing or lack of income or bad policies, whatever, were front and center. That's part of why we're excited about folks from the Union of Southern Service Workers and the other groups, that some of whom you will meet tomorrow, when Mary Kay Henry will be speaking in the morning, and many local North Carolina workers will speak after that time. And then you'll hear from Dr. Barber in the role of clergy from different faiths in this whole struggle. So making your way is a lot of what I know is necessary now. But we have the advantage of having some good-hearted and good-intended and prepared people in so-called high places. So we should be able to go higher, but never leave out that part. What did you say earlier, Nelson? That if the basement moves, everybody's got to move. So particularly if you're moving broader and up higher, that's what we want. So let's make use of these opportunities and not sit back and think we've just got to wait on somebody with an important name or position, because my view is that we're all important. Not my view, that's what the teaching has been put in me all my life, and that's what I try to share. You just got to embrace that and do it.
Thank you, Mama Joyce. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, which is building off of this question. I want to try to get to a synthesis of what every city needs. So I want to name 4 that I heard, and then I want to ask y'all what is missing. And what would you dial in on? What's highest priority? And I think we know what Reverend Nelson's going to say. So the first one, political will. So we talked about that. And, that may be more necessary in the later stages of a process than the early stages, but eventually necessary. Second thing was a strong commission. I heard you speak about what happens when the commission is fractured. Also heard y'all speak about just the emotional toll and the burnout. So what does it look like for the commission to be able to function really well? The third is resources to support the work, and I know that is directly tied to having a strong commission. And then the fourth, obviously, is the community organizing piece, is the basement, is the engagement, both in the beginning in order to make sure that community voices are being heard, but also that power is being built in order to put pressure on government and on, I loved the addition of the private sector too. Does that resonate with y'all? And what's missing? What else would you add?
I'll jump in. What's missing? If you notice through all that we've talked about up here, we've all basically said the same thing, only articulated it differently, all right? And if you listen to what we're saying, you'll see that our experiences have been different in some way. So I pose this question: what if we all came together with our strengths and the challenges that we each faced, and hashed it out among us, along with you, and went statewide? Just think about that. Just think of the power that this room holds through the experiences that we've all been a part of. That takes care of politics, that takes care of resources, that takes care of any challenges that are there. So I just will pose that question.
And basically, that's why we're here, Joe. Yeah. And you're contributing to that. In fact, when they had their public announcement, I was so excited. Bridget and I went over there, Somebody asked for High Point residents to stand up. I said, well, I'm from Guilford County. I'm from Greensboro. But look, what's she doing up here? But I congratulated folks and told them we were proud of what High Point's doing. And oftentimes, this is two-city county here, and High Point's seen as the little brother, I guess. But it's like y'all in front on this, and that's good. I hope we'll encourage us and the rest of our state to do this work. We need this work, you know, and a lot of the citizens, I don't know what your city council people thought, but a lot of the citizens were touched by that, knowing that somebody else thought that what they were doing and struggled for was going to make a difference. So I agree with what you're saying, for sure.
I was going to say what I think is missing. I think the brother from Asheville mentioned it earlier. I think we're missing a common language. I think once, you know, making sure you're using the right language, because whether it's a commemoration, whether it's reparations, whether it's for blacks, whether it's for other ethnic groups, having that common language, I think, is missing to kind of drive. It's easier to drive it if we speak in the right language, in my opinion.
We're missing an opportunity to engage the federal government in H.R. 40. In Wilmington, we have a claim to federal reparations because the federal government was in part complicit with the 1898 massacre and coup d'etat by ignoring the pleas for support from the people who were being targeted by the violence on that particular event. We're also all, in the whole entire country, a crime scene, right? The entire country should have yellow crime scene tape around it. That's a bigger issue.
Can you explain to everybody what H.R. 40 is?
Yeah, H.R. 40 is a bill for a House resolution in the United States Congress in support of reparations in the United States. To study, right, to study it. I mean, it's going to take a long time to study it, but to study it means to also excavate a plan and construct a plan. So I think we need to keep our eye on that prize as well.
For me, it's keeping an eye on outcomes assessment and accountability. But it's also important that I think my brother from High Point was saying this, is that, but I would differ. I'd widen our alliances. I'm in conversation internationally, and for example, one of my former students, I'm proud to say, is chair of the Bahamian Reparations Commission. She looks at us for examples for reparations for colonialism, but their colonialism began with enslavement. Those are common roots, and so alliances and accountability measures are really important for me.
And one of the things I think that we need is, I think we need to figure out a way to talk to those who don't see the need for this work. We have to find a way to translate the necessity of it to say a few things. Number one, and I resist the concept of reparations, because I think that reparations are not enough, particularly if we vision them only financially or in material ways. We've got to change systems, and we've got to figure out a way to change systems. And then we've got to get people to buy into that. So how do we have this conversation with Republicans? How do we have this conversation with people who are evangelicals? How do we have this conversation with those who also need to be brought to the table if we're going to be able to get this changed? And again, I love that notion of a common language. When we started this work, we were working with, and still work with, Rabbi Mark Gopin from the Carter Center, the Carter School at George Mason University for conflict resolution and world religions. And one of the things he said is the concept of reparations causes trouble when people hear it, unfortunately. But we can achieve the same thing if we use the word atonement, which has deep theological roots. And atonement can be viewed immediately as systemic. How do you atone on a systemic level? And then how might this be language that will play in the common square, in the public square, in a way that brings people to us? And I also think, I just listened to people like Ta-Nehisi Coates talk about the idea, we need to find a way to help other people see it benefits us all to find a way to restore African American people for the harm that's taken place. You think about the economic engine that is the United States of America. If African American people were paid on scale with their white counterparts, that would supercharge our economy. If we were given access to education at the same level as people in the suburbs are, that would incredibly enhance our intellectual ability. If we are able to truly transform this country for the better, we all benefit. And I think that's the narrative that we have to be able to tell. A common narrative that by improving these issues, by atoning for the injustices of the past, we improve our collective lives.
Go ahead.
Nobody has said anything wrong. It's how you order things. I want to suggest that without building a grassroots base, it's just not going to happen. The success that we have had is because we formed the Greensboro Association of Poor People before Martin Luther King formed his Poor People's Organization. It just made sense. Who are the best people to struggle for poor people except poor people? And when we went to welfare department, we got results. And when we challenged the city leaders and county leaders, we got results. Now, I'm not saying you won't get it if you take Mr. So-and-so who's this or that, but he's in a position to be, I don't want to say bribe, but I will go ahead and say it. The grassroots got nothing to lose and everything to gain. You just have to help them believe that they have the potential power to make it change. And that's when you start walking together. I'm not opposed. Let me pause because I love that clapping back there. And I want to push for that pretty hard. None of what anybody said is not appropriate. But actually, I think the foundation for an enduring movement has to come out of the people who thirst and hunger for change more than anybody else, and maybe have convinced that they're incapable of bringing about change, that they've been misled by culture into believing that they don't have any power. But when a bunch of poor people get together, other people listen. And that's a fact. We know it's a fact because everything we've done here in Greensboro has been rooted in building a grassroots base. That's not to argue against other things, but for it to be enduring and for it to be owned by the poor people, they have to be in it pretty early on. So I just want to, you can tell by how I'm hollering up here, that I want to promote that view, not to the negation of the other views, but as foundational. If the foundation is not there, the thing is just not going to hold.
And I think I live in one of the most red districts, maybe the reddest congressional district in the United States. I'm in Southwest Virginia. And one thing we did, we were making, I know I'm not a panelist, but I want to put that out there in terms of wrestling with the language and the vocabulary. We were making some headway there on equity initiatives right before the anti-CRT movement happened and people started showing up at school board meetings complaining. One thing we did was pull together people, the people who had been working with us, Republicans, Trump supporters, you know, everybody, grandmas, religious leaders, and we said, let's come up with our own Pulaski County definition of what equity means. And we gave them a very Pulaski County, that's my hometown, metaphor. We said, we got a lake there, everybody fishes. So we said, imagine a fishing tournament. Every child in Pulaski County gets to come, and whoever catches the most fish wins. We said they won their dreams coming true or something like that. And we said, come up with the rules for this, because some kids are going to be fishing from the bank with a cane rod, and some kids are going to have parents and coaches and the most expensive bass fishing boats, and I'm not a fisher person, so I don't know what all that is, but we had people walk out of there after struggling with this definition. They said, on their evaluations of the event, they said, well, I like the definition we came up with, but that's not what Governor Northam talks about. That's not what Joe Biden means when he says equity. And so, but if you build up your common definition and you really start from that, it's different in your communities. The cities, as you all know, y'all are blue cities, so you've got, your struggle with the county, Buncombe County, I guess, you've got a different political will there. So if you want to pull up in the people, I would recommend that. Speaking of pulling in the people, sorry, we want to give you all a chance to come up and give feedback. So if you all want to come up, speak to their, offer advice on their challenges, ask questions.
I just want to speak real quick as a member of the Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee in North Carolina. What you're saying is exactly what Reverend Barber has been saying. We are speaking with one voice. And this is what Reverend Barber always says is the most important thing. One band, one note. We use the common language. We are nonviolent. We are diverse. And people who know me know that my issue, my passion, is universal access to good quality health care because my son died from lack of it. But I can't accept universal health care while people are living on starvation wages. I can't accept health care for everyone while people are being denied the education they deserve. So I want to reach out. I want to be with diverse groups. We're trying to pull this together in Asheville a little bit. The Poor People's Campaign is calling on groups like Indivisible and Third Act to work with us. And we've been meeting, and we're actually coming up with thoughts on what the most important thing we can do, which is get the vote out. So we're going to work on that one issue, even though we all have different issues that we're passionate about. And I think this is what I'm hearing from everyone here today, so I'm really, really excited. Thank you.
Got Liz and then Lewis. Lib. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I am so excited to know that the place where I was born in High Point, North Carolina, has come through with this. I did not know that this was happening in High Point. What I do know is that along I-85, there were farms that were black-owned farms. The land was actually taken. I know personally people who did not resist the DOT, and the land was taken by eminent domain. Those were people in Trinity, North Carolina, where the people had no elementary school for people of color. And the high school students were bused to High Point from Trinity to go to school. So I'm old enough to remember the whites only, and go to Rose's and or go to the shoe store and you couldn't try on the shoes. So there's many of us in this room that are of a certain age who remember these things. And we really want to make a difference before we pass on. We want to be able to pass on the peace to people who can live in harmony together and be part of this movement to make a difference. So before I go on and on, I do have a question. And that is, how does the Farm Bill, which has already been introduced and suggests reparations for black farmers, connect with what you're doing in the urban area? Is that too out of the box question for this panel? I don't know.
I don't know, but maybe somebody in the room. Lewis, Brand, is that something you know about? Is Lewis still in here? If somebody can write it down and we can see if we can come back to it.
I don't have a clear answer to that. I do know the Black Farmers Association in the county I grew up in. And I know the families that have black farms and have been going to national black farm conventions. I'm glad you raised it because I'm going to get on it and get a better understanding of it so that we can share it. I just don't have that right now that I can speak to with any credibility.
Thank you.
Black farmers. St. James Church is working with black farmers and the Farm Bill, and they had a symposium not long ago. They also had a black farmers market at Hayes Taylor this past weekend, or I think it was this past weekend.
Past week. And Lolita will be here sometime during the week. That was one of the people I was thinking about.
So there is a lot being done on that line, but that's another area that needs to be, hooked into this greater.
I'll just jump in with one more thought, which is I think that you bringing up that issue speaks to the fact that there are so many different sites of harm that need repair. And that is just one of an additional, there's work happening, working on racial violence, lynching and racial violence during Jim Crow. There's work happening focused on the war on drugs. There's work happening focused on making black folks who never got their GI Bill benefits. And so I think, we've seen the federal government make moves on black farmers more so than on other issues, but it's currently stalled because they're getting sued. And so I think it's actually important for us to keep tabs on that case because we can learn from it to help smooth the path for future cases on other sites of harm. So that's what I would add. Thank you for the question. It does set precedent.
And just for my High Point person, one of the commissioners that was on our Reparation Commission is now part of the Black Farmers Initiative. Her family lost a lot of land.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Lewis Pitts. I live here in Greensboro, and I think this is all absolutely wonderful. Reverend Johnson's mentioning earlier of the phrase about deliberate ditches of division, I think is a very important point to help us remember to strive to be tolerant and patient, not of the injustice, but of each other. And also think of the Frederick Douglass phrase, which is being emphasized here recently by also Nelson, of the importance of grassroots movements and the people who are suffering. And Frederick Douglass' power concedes nothing without a demand. And I can feel the inevitability coming of, and this is not to be a naysayer, of significant differences in opinion in what is too rowdy and what is too radical to deal with here. And it's not an accident that the most energy and cheering comes from the labor movement in the back. And when they want to demand from the rest of us that we not appreciate the fierce urgency of now, that people are dying and starving and getting shot by the police and killed and it's covered up, then we won't have that walking together. I'm not in any way suggesting we can't do that. And I don't know a lot about, but the fight or the struggle in Atlanta around Cop City, if you're aware of that one, that seems to be a wonderful microcosm of starting out where, well, the usual stuff. Let's write a letter to city council, or let's make some phone calls. Next thing you know, some of that movement is turning over police cars and knocking over motorcycles. Apparently, they haven't split apart on that. They've been able to do what we're hearing, largely from Reverend Johnson and Joyce and others. How do we love each other and trust each other and walk together and work through that? Maybe and I'm not on record here saying turning over police cars. Some people may want to do things that I don't want to do or you don't want to do. That doesn't mean I have to quit. It means we could stake out our different orientations, but with that larger umbrella. So I offer that other comments, if you have to that.
I know someone who has a great quote on this that pretty much sums up what you just said. I'm looking at him. He's not looking at me, though. Rob? What is it that you always say about this?
So, yeah, I think the statement that the individual just made definitely hit me in a personal place. It's one of the biggest issues we have in our local movement, where we have a very diverse community of black people, you know, and we have all the isms. We've got ageism, we've got nativism, we've got, you know, the academia versus lived experience, all the things. So I think the statement that you're referring to is unity over uniformity. How do we actually realize that? We haven't realized that in Asheville, and it's complicated because that individual outlined a very important thing. You know, me being an activist, I know I'm way more radical than anybody who has spent their tenure in academia or the city of Asheville. But I can see solutions to things that you can't because you're working with a different deck of cards than me. So how we bring them together and both actualize what we're doing. We're gonna have disagreements. You're not gonna want me to do some of the things that I am going to do. But how do we still work together after that? You know what I mean? And that's where we're at. And I will leave y'all with that question. I have my own thoughts.
Thanks, Rob. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary White from Durham. I said, good afternoon. I'm Mary White from Durham. I could say that I might represent the Faith Health Caucus of the NC Medicare for All Coalition, or I could say that I might represent the healthcare unit of the Peacemaking Network of the Presbytery of New Hope, which is part of the Presbyterian Church in North Carolina. But mainly, I just want to thank Reverend Mrs. Johnson for this particular topic today. It's something that's very concerning to all of us. And strangely enough, when I heard about the reparations in Asheville, I don't know why, I was just so shocked that that's where it seemed to start and was located. You know, I don't know why, but maybe because of Biltmore or something, I don't know. But I didn't know much about it. And then I learned today that it has spread it into High Point, and that was just amazing. It was just wonderful. And then, of course, now that you hear about the people in Wilmington reaching out where historically they have really needed this for so long, that it's amazing just to know that this work is going on. So I thank you for that. And then not forgetting Charlotte, because you expect everything coming out of Charlotte. But it's just a way of keeping us informed and together. Mrs. Johnson, I hate to put anything else on you because you do so much work. But I'm just wondering if there is a way that you can help connect us with all of these organizations so that they can get on some kind of list where we can know what progress they are making and what ways that we might be able to, intervene with them at some point in time. And I think that's a small ask, so I don't really mind asking you that, and I thank you so much for the panel.
Thank you for asking. She doesn't mind asking. With the help of our communications and our interns and whatever, we can make that happen through our newsletter and hope that people, first of all, there will be some of what's happened here. But yes, we do in our beloved community center distributions, make sure that we include not just what we're in, but what the people are in. So thank you so much for that. The same way we help promote your activity you had in Durham, it was about a year ago. So keep the news coming and we'll spread it. Brother Phillip?
Our weekly meeting on Wednesdays, is a good way to connect with the community.
Her face is usually on the meeting, but she's at most of those meetings too. On Wednesdays at noon, we're here today, so I don't know what we did today. I see a lot of y'all here. But we have the beloved community roundtable. It's been called a lot of things over the last 20-some years. But folk gather between noon and about 1:30, kind of lunch hour for folks who have that type of job or who don't have a job or whatever. And we gather in circle and talk. And it's about big questions. It's about whether Central or A&T should have won the game. It's about, things of that nature. But it really does build relationship and community. When COVID struck, we got ourselves together enough to figure out how to do it on Zoom. And that had a good advantage of people like Sister from Durham and people from Raleigh and other folks. Folks used to stop through traveling, but now they're on regularly. And a wide variety of people, intergenerational, just good conversation. So that's what Philip was talking about.
Thank you.
And I want to plead for a couple of my friends, to our moderators, who, by the way, let's give our moderators a hand. I think you chose the right folks. They've been doing work and really recording some of this stuff through the years about what's going on with these initiatives. I do want Keith and his friend to say whatever.
Oh man, this is such a blessed time to be with y'all. So happy to be here. My name is Keith Bullard. I'm with USSW. It's brother Jose from USSW. And we've, along with so many amazing others, like Connie and Sister Connie, Sister Lucy and Rena, and so many others in Durham and Chapel Hill, have been coming together with our, meetings about the truth, justice, and reconciliation process and things. And there's been a lot of great conversations that's come up, but one thing that we've been just wrestling with, or just talking through a bit more, and just want to hear your thoughts on it, is just like with everything that's going on in the world and in our communities and things, and and we're talking about the truth. Sometimes that truth, a lot of times, bring up a lot of emotions, even anger and things. And at times we can find ourselves being angry and frustrated with the truth. And then that enemy that instantly draws that line in the sand, because when you're upset, it's the enemy, it's somebody against you, right? And so what's your idea with everything, with y'all experiencing things? How do we, not just be upset with talking about the truth, but also open up that space where justice and reconciliation can go through, where we can begin to heal our communities and our workplaces and everything with everybody?
Can I take a stab at that? So I am so grateful to you for bringing that perspective to our conversation. What we haven't talked about in this panel yet is probably a topic for an entire different panel in addition to this one, which is racial trauma and healing racial trauma and generational trauma and epigenetics and all of the ways in which we need to address that, understand that, heal from those wounds of generational trauma. And as a trauma-informed racial justice practitioner of restorative justice, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And the anger is real, and it's justified, and the injustices and inhumanity in our history is real, and it's terrifying, and it's not over. So in order for us to really tackle this emotional base, this emotional need, we need to love each other, we need to honor each other, we need to understand the emotional dynamics at play in these conditions that are brought on by the inhumanity of colonization and neocolonialism and the brutality of exploitive capitalism, right? So I find an enormous amount of hope in the labor movement right now going on, the strikes that are happening. I find an enormous amount of hope in you being here, you being in a position where you can say what you said and say your truth. I find an enormous amount of hope in my students at the university and in the serious conversations we're having about epigenetics and racial trauma and healing and resistance. And resistance is, of course, the crux of the historical story in the United States, right? The resistance, the resilience, the strength. But Lord have mercy, we've had enough need of being strong, right? Can we just have fun? Can we just be whole? Can we just be healed, right? Can we be joyful? Where's the role of joy in this movement? That's what I want to know. We need to dance, right? We need to sing, we need to color, we need to play. And that will help move us toward healing. It won't be the whole of it, but it'll be part of it. So thank you for that question.
I see the brother standing waiting to speak. You come right on up after I finish. I don't have, a deep, earth-breaking answer to the question. But in my comments earlier this morning, I talked about deep listening. And deep listening means almost straining to feel what the other person is trying to say. And then the deep listening can lead to respectful speaking. You don't know all of what people are wrestling with, so you don't need to act like you can throw out answers, but be there and speak to the person, and to the extent you can, to the wound that the person has opened up to you. The listening is a sign of respect, and when you give respect, you can get respect, that they listen to you and something meaningful start to happen. And I just wanted to raise that as part of my experience. Sometimes you just have to stop and listen to people, and don't try to give quick answers, but give responses that are encouraging and helpful to people. And I think that might be one way to engage that.
Can I step right in? First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to be here today. And I apologize to everyone, but I just recently had surgery, and I've sat here about as long as I can sit here. So if anybody want to get in contact with me, Sister Johnson can get you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Alston.
And I just wanted to give a sort of a practical response to that question, because I think it's right. We do come out of these situations traumatized. One of the things that we did when we started with our hearings is noting that people are telling stories about rape, they're telling stories about murder, they're telling stories about loss of land. So we established something called the parking lot conversation. After the hearing was over, we'd go into a different Zoom link and we'd sit down in the parking lot conversation. Rabbi Mark Gopin, who's a conflict resolution specialist, would actually help people to walk through what was going on, how they were feeling, how they were dealing with the crises and the concerns that they heard. And it was impactful for speakers as well as those who were listening to these stories. A lot of tears were shed, a lot of opportunities for catharsis came out of that. And in addition to that, when we meet every week, we usually meet, Reverend Glency, 48, 49 times a year on Wednesday nights. A good deal of those times are times for processing. Horrible racial events are going on every day. How do we deal with that? How are we sharing our emotions, our feelings, our grief, our pain? How do we lament together so that collective lament becomes a way of also dealing with that kind of trauma?
Really quickly, I just want to say I think it's important for people to remember that anger, whether we're the ones angry or listening to somebody being angry, angry means you have hope that something can be different. And so when I was a teacher, I really felt like my kids who were angry, I was excited about that. You tap into that. It's the kids who just sit back and are silent that you have to be concerned about. So whether you're the person who feels angry and you can remind people of that means you have hope, that something can be different. And we said we were going to do closing remarks, but with your permission, I'd like to give Dr. Favors a chance to he has an announcement to make, and we'll use that to round out the panel.
Yeah, so Vincent Harding, the great Vincent Harding said there is a river, and I'm so honored to be with all of these streams that are connected here. Going back to the agricultural question, I just wanted to make a very quick announcement for those who are in Greensboro. On Monday, October the 30th at 6 p.m., the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences will be hosting Bread for the World, an agricultural advocacy group on A&T's campus to discuss racial equity and social justice in the food system. So if you're present, if you're in Greensboro, want to learn more about some of these issues and how to connect, please come out. Many of our students are going to make their way over to that particular event. I just wanted to make that announcement, coming back to the question that was raised about agriculture and, once again, building these streams together. I'm going to send an email to the Beloved Community Center, and you all can distribute that out. But it's going to be held on the campus of A&T. It doesn't say here in the email where it's going to be held, but it's Webb Hall. Thank you. Webb Hall, which is part of the Agriculture Department at A&T. But again, I'll make sure the details get out. If you're in Greensboro, please come by.
Thank you. And let's give our panelists a round of applause.
And before you all wrap up, and Reverend Johnson, before y'all wrap up, can each one of the panelists just say your name again and how people can contact you before you close out, Reverend Johnson?
Yeah, I don't know who's speaking, but.
Oh, it's TC right behind you. I'm saying if each panelist can give you a name and just your contact information. You know, we're in the same office space. He don't remember my voice. He thought it was the Beloved.
My name is Frankie Roberts. I'm from Wilmington, and you can reach us on Facebook at Coming to the Table, Wilmington. Coming to the Table, Wilmington.
I'm Kim Cook. You can email me at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. It's Cook, C-O-O-K-K, at uncw.edu. That's my email address, so feel free to reach out that way, as well as our Facebook group. Thank you.
I'm Dwight Mullen, and you can contact me through the City of Asheville, the Community Reparations Commission, or the Reparations Commission for the City of Asheville, Buncombe County. They have links and can take you to documents, but can also put you in contact with me.
And we can be reached at Joyce J at belovedcommunitycenter.org. And of course, through the communications. And by the way, we'll get this information to all of you who participated.
Thank you. I'm Rodney Sadler, and I can be reached at Union Presbyterian Seminary, the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation, or if you reach out to the Reimagining AmericaProject.org, you can always reach us through there.
I'm Aria Florant with Liberation Ventures, and I can be reached at aria@liberationventures.org.
Jill E. Williams at gmail.com.
There is a phrase that we been using and to some degree popularized, and I want to just put it out for the benefit of us here, and that is striving, straining, and trying to walk toward each other. We don't have to be in complete agreement. In fact, we probably won't be. But actually, as we walk toward each other, it's my deep conviction that eventually we'll be walking with each other. And when we walk together, that's when change can come. So I just want to express my deep appreciation for each and every person here today. And if you didn't get anything else, hold on to that. Keep walking toward each other. Keep straining to believe in the best of each other so that we can actually make the change that we purpose to make.
All right, let's give our panelists a round of applause. We're going to do one group shot since I see Fidel just jumped right in the front. If we can get a group shot right quick. Did y'all enjoy the panel as they're taking this group shot? Y'all must be in the hip hop. You're throwing mics down. Don't go anywhere before we're going to have a short break, but don't go anywhere yet. Let's get this quick picture. And while they're doing the picture, what we're going to do before everybody leaves out, we're just going to take a few-minute break, and we will be starting right back at 3:30 p.m. We will be starting back at 3:30 p.m. So did everyone enjoy this panel? All right, all right.